All right, let's go ahead and get started. It is so good to see all of you. My name is Brittany Hardy. I'm the moderator for this session. Is an MD PhD right for me? Good to see all of you. And I have with me a very esteemed panel that is going to be very excited to answer all of your questions. But before we do that, we're going to do a very short presentation from our panel, and then we will move into the Q&A session. So let's get started.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbara Kazmierzak. I'm the Yale PhD program, MD PhD program director, and I'm going to be walking you through an abbreviated version of MD PhD Is It Right for Me, which is going to focus on the application process. For those of you who get nervous about material that's being presented, don't worry about taking notes. This is being recorded, and these slides will be available to you. So just sit back, listen, and think of questions. So as you all know, we're interested in training physician scientists. So how are physician scientists different from just doctors? And I think the key here is that physicians use biomedical knowledge to treat patients to inform how they approach them. But physician scientists are the people who generate that knowledge. So in training as a physician scientist, you will be prepared not only by going through medical school to take care of patients, but also through graduate school to perform cutting edge research that will fill the gaps in medical knowledge that physicians face when taking care of patients. So preparing for and applying to MD PhD programs is a long and onerous process. I'm glad that you guys are here in the room listening to how to do this. And I think one of the things I'd like to stress today are the elements that make a successful MD PhD application and applicant. So as you know, we all participate in holistic reviews. So we're not looking at specific numbers. No MCAT or GPA is going to be the magic thing that makes or breaks an MD PhD application. But we do want to make sure that you have a strong academic preparation so that you can go through a medical school and graduate school curriculum successfully. We also want to make sure that you understand what it is to be a physician scientist so that you have not only experience in caring for patients or other people in your life, but that you've also had substantive research experience. And we'll get into that in just a moment. These experiences should help you understand what it is to be a physician scientist and to express your commitment, your interest, and your goals for that career. And of course, because this is a long path, we want to make sure that you have the personal characteristics to succeed: integrity, maturity, and resilience, and that you bring yourself, your activities, and your life experiences, not just to that application, but also to your career. So a lot of people say, what is a substantive research experience? And I think the elements that we're looking for in our application are that this experience is sustained. It's not just a few weeks here or there, informative though that might be for you in exploring this career. We want you to understand the idea of testing a hypothesis, and we want you to understand how you develop and present and argue your research. Even though publications are not required, stress this, publications are not required, we want you to have that sort of deep experience of setting a problem for yourself and then working through the process of addressing it and answering it. And this sort of research can be done in many different settings. Many of you are here at the NIH doing a postbac, but many of you will have this sort of experience as an undergraduate in your institution, or will participate in a prolonged summer research experience over 1 or 2 seasons. Those of you in the room are taking a gap year. Many of you, others will be asking whether this is something that's necessary to do an MD PhD. And I just want to say that as MD PhD directors, we do not expect or require people to do gap years, but for many of you, that experience is important because it either convinces you that this full-time research is a career and an activity that you love to do and you want to engage in, or it gives you a chance to have that substantive research experience that your undergraduate institution could not provide. Some of you may have been in labs for a long time, but you've been working as technicians or as assistants to others. So a gap year can provide you with that test of having a hypothesis that you have to develop and validate on your own, the failures as well as the successes that come along with that. And for some of you, thinking about being in an MD PhD program for 7 or 8 years just seems like a really long time, and you still haven't been in research enough to know if that training in that career for you. So in all these cases, we think gap years make sense, but they're really to make you more sure of your path. They're not to fill some sort of a box on the application. And so I want you to look at that gap year not recommended column and think about whether you or some of your friends who are considering a gap year might not need one. Now, if you do have a gap year, what should you do? And our advice to you is please do research during that gap year if you are trying to use it to understand whether MD PhD is the path you wish to follow. And again, you can do that as a full-time paid position, as part of a program in an independent lab, or some of you might find that an organized master's or prep program with a strong research component is really what makes the most sense for you to address what you consider to be gaps in your academic preparation as well as your research experience. Another part of your application that we're just going to briefly stress are the letters of recommendation. As directors, we look to those letters to give us insight into your character, into your motivation, into your work ethic, and to tell us an aspect of who you are that's really important for our programs. So when you think about who's going to write those letters, make sure that you identify people who really know you well. Not somebody who's just taught you in a large survey course, but somebody with whom you've worked quite closely. And of course, your research mentors are the people who are going to know you the best. When you approach your research mentor or anybody else for a letter, be very forthright and ask if they can write a strong, positive letter for you. You don't want somebody to say yes and then write you a weak letter or write a letter that doesn't reflect who you are and who you want to present. Make sure you give them the ammunition and information to write that letter. Be very thoughtful of their time and of the commitment they're making to you, and make sure that you prepare them and provide them with information that will help them meet that time commitment. I think you guys understand all these different aspects, just not research, that go into letter writing. But make sure that when you do ask people for letters, that your research mentor is one of the letter writers. If you've worked very closely with a postdoc in a big lab, one great strategy to use is to have your postdoc draft your letter and to have your mentor, PI, and postdoc both sign it. Another thing that is very important in applications is the fact that we as program directors want to train a diverse physician scientist workforce that's going to really advance care and knowledge for our entire population. So as we all know, diversity is truly important. It enhances innovation. It creates a culturally competent physician scientist workforce. It increases the global impact of our work instead of making it very narrowly focused. And it's really the foundation for social justice. All of the work that we do now has to benefit everyone equally and has to rectify many of the historical inequities and barriers that are present in our field. But as you know, the Supreme Court made a decision last year that forbids programs like MD PhD programs from taking race into account when making admissions decisions. So how do we rectify these two concepts? What I want to stress very much is that we still care, and you can still talk about how race or any other aspect of your identity affects your life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. And this just steps back to the point that we really want to know about you. We don't want to know about the generic MD PhD applicant, but we want to know about you and what you're bringing to the table. So please take those essays very seriously as you prepare your secondary applications. Talk about the family background and experiences that make you interested in being a physician or a scientist. Talk about the barriers that you've overcome that might affect the application that you present or the experiences that you were able to have as a trainee. Talk about the community that you grew up in and how it affects your outlook on life and your motivation to be a physician scientist. Talk about your education. We know that everybody who's applying to an MD PhD program doesn't have the same opportunities, the same institutional backing, the same hidden curriculum explained to them. So tell us about what your preparation is like and things that may have happened in your life that uniquely make you interested in this career. We all know that preparing for an MD PhD program application is a long time. Many of you are already on this process, but for those of you who are still looking forward to it, remember that even just preparing this application alone and submitting it begins a good year and a half before you become an MD PhD student. And of course, the years before that are spent in getting the experiences that will prepare you and convince you that this is the course for you. So that's a very brief introduction. What I want to do now is let my panelists introduce themselves and have you ask the questions that are important for you. Okay.
Thank you, Barbara. My name is Jose Cavazos. I am a physician scientist in epilepsy and Alzheimer's disease. I still see patients and I still do research. I am the South Texas MSTP director based at UT Health San Antonio.
All right, here we go. So I'm Neil Chi. I am a physician scientist, also trained in an MD PhD program many years ago. So I know what many of you may be experiencing as you go through this process. I am still a practicing physician and cardiologist specifically. Do most of my time, 80% of my time doing research on heart development and heart regeneration. And I co-direct the MD PhD program at the University of California, San Diego.
So I'm Barb Kazmierzak. As you heard, I'm the director of Yale's MD PhD program. I'm an adult infectious disease physician whose laboratory studies microbial pathogenesis.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Tranguch. I'm the Associate Dean for Research, Training, and Communications at NYU Grossman School of Medicine. And in my role, I oversee the graduate programs, including the MD PhD program.
Hi, I'm Megan Williams. I'm Assistant Director for the MD PhD program at Vanderbilt, where I direct admissions and recruiting. I did get a PhD in neuroscience at Vanderbilt, but I've been working now in administration for about 10 years as part of our MSTP leadership team.
All right, thank you so much to our panel for being here today. So I'm going to start us off with a question that I'm asking each one of our panelists to touch on. The first question that I have is, could each of our panelists touch on what are their thoughts on the use of AI, chatbots, ChatGTP, et cetera, in the process of applying to an MD PhD program or crafting an application?
So what the essays are about is your journey. The machine, the AI, doesn't know about your journey. And we can tell very easily who has used ChatGPT or other AI to do these very elaborate, essays. They need to sound like you. When we're interviewing you, we are going to be comparing the dude that write the application and the person that is in front of us. So if you want to use these tools to try to generate ideas for what should I write in a medical school application, that is okay. As a non-native English speaker, it's very helpful for me to utilize ChatGPT to help me do certain things in articles or grant proposals. But what I do is try to use it for a punch sentence and no more than that. Because the idea is that it needs to sound like you. And again, there's no perfect essay. It is about your journey. And address the gaps, address the blemishes is very critical.
I would fully agree with what Jose is saying. I think Barb also kind of highlighted that essay is really critical and important, and it really should be about you. I think I mentioned this morning with some of you that actually that essay, you can really, what you want to do is write an essay that is about, as Jose said, your journey, your life, well, how you came to that decision to become a physician scientist. And sometimes what can happen is that one writes a generic essay, and I don't know if that's as helpful as hearing about listening to hear what your experiences or what led that decision to become a physician scientist. I feel that AI would be, especially if you're deriving that concept from AI, a little bit dangerous in that what might very well happen is that you get the same sort of, all of you may get sort of that same response, and it might very well be generic, and that is not necessarily what we're looking for in the application. So I've shared the similar feelings of what Jose and what Barb had mentioned earlier.
Nothing really different. If you use AI to generate a sort of perfect MD PhD application, we'll probably not want to interview you because we're really looking for individuals who don't talk in generalities, but talk in specifics about themselves and their dreams.
Hi, yeah, I agree with everyone. I think also AI is a tool, right? So you can use it maybe to help you edit your statement, or if you like, I think I used to use the thesaurus, right, in Word. I'm dating myself. But things like that. But to generate content, you really want to stay away from it. It'll benefit you.
Yeah, I don't have much to add either. I think, an editing tool, this sentence is, I'm not kind of getting this phrased the way I want. Maybe AI can help me come up with a little bit better sentence structure to make my point. Things like that. Certainly feel free to use that. But as everyone said, it's about you and your individual story, not about why someone in general might want to do an MD PhD program. That's not what we're looking for. One step that I forgot before when I introduced myself is that we did want to see, there's us up here, but also other MD PhD program directors and administrators in the audience. So can we just have like a show of hands of who else might be out there to help give some advice possibly at the end?
I see some people here on the right side.
Yeah.
Three.
Three people.
And then about 5 over here.
Yeah.
So I think
And another one. Sorry.
what we sometimes like to do, and I think we'll do today, is end maybe about 10 minutes early and just give everybody an opportunity to come up to the front who are MD PhD program directors and administrators to give more small group conversations one-on-one with more questions and more time to talk to more people. So we just wanted to get a sense, and it does look like there's a good group out there. So we'll do that at the end. Thank you.
All right, so this is your time. There are 2 mics on either side of the room. Please come up to the podium. We have the experts in the room. Ask them your questions. Elena, we can start with you with any questions you had online.
Yeah, online there is a follow-up question. Do you recommend going to services that help you write a personal statement if you are struggling or want assistance?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, if you recommend students to go to services that help you write a personal statement.
So let's see here. They are again, just like AI, this is gonna be about what? Someone else writing your essay. I mean, just reflect down. Perhaps the brainstorming component of this is to, ask, why are you doing this? What are your motivations? Start generating some ideas. Now, keep in mind that we want to get your application through medical school. So you need to answer the question of why patients and not just why an MD PhD and not just a PhD. So it's about research. It's about biomedical advancement, investigation, but it is also about taking inspiration from clinical patients who may have a particular condition or particular situation. And because you understand the clinical scenario so much better than a PhD, bring that inspiration into the animal models or cells or whatever theoretical construct that you are investigating, and use the critical thinking of the PhD, of asking the right questions with their rigor, reproducibility, and critical thinking that scientists are accustomed to. And so the point is that you inform your research by your clinical scenarios, as well as you bring the gap between the science and the clinical patients.
Something I might suggest to you, if you find yourself hard pressed to put words to paper, is to have a friend, somebody maybe in a lab that you work in, basically talk to you, interview you, so that you can talk about the things that make you interested in going to medical school and an MD PhD program, and have them just record you on your phone. And sometimes if you talk it through, you can find that phrase, that idea that you can then begin to put to paper. And don't forget that many universities will have writing tutors. Even if they're not scientists, they can help you convey your ideas clearly, just as part of your normal college experience, not somebody that you pay to write an essay for you.
Yeah, I agree with Barb here, and I was going to make a similar suggestion. In fact, another way of doing this is also writing it down and having someone else read it. It's the same idea, but I think that's actually kind of helpful. The other thing that I would add on the AI, I would be careful on the AI in the sense that even for simple sentences, you do want to be sure that it's done correctly, because AI is not perfect. I have found that out. So any tool that you use, I guess the way to think about it is that you're sure that you read it and that you are okay with it, that you own it. And then if you're still not sure, I think this is where this idea of coming back and having someone else read it and giving you feedback. I think many of you are lucky in the sense that you have good mentors and things of that nature, friends that know you well. And so reaching out to them actually is really a very important process, I think, in writing these essays.
All right, thank you. So again, please feel free to come up to the mics. Don't be shy. Ask a question. And if you do come up to the mic, maybe say your name, you know, what institute you're at or school that you're at, so our panelists can get to know you a little bit. So we have a couple questions over here. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for your panel. I'm Alana. I'm a rising senior from the University of Maryland, College Park. I just have a few questions. So Dr. Cavazos, you said that you want to inform your research based off of your clinical experience. MD PhD programs, would you prefer more clinical hours or more like in-depth experience from the clinical hours if you're like from one office or from like one place?
So the fundamental question that we ask in MD PhD applicants is research, research, and research. Okay. Now we need to get you in medical school. We need to understand why MD. And our committees, we are going to be asking that you need to have some physician shadowing, some volunteering. But this is not like medical school admission committees that are looking for you to have like the check mark for this, check mark for that, the check mark for that. I mean, this is not what we're looking for. What we're looking is for emerging scientists that also want to do be physicians. And so again, the bridge between science and medicine is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we need translators, people who are doing translational research, as I said, that are doing some, I mean, if you look at MD PhD outcomes, some people are doing clinical research, some people are doing translational research, basic investigation, etc. The reality is many times it's the same people going back and forth. So just have a little bit of a reflection. If you have an opportunity as a researcher and there is some physician who is actually doing stuff in the lab, collaborating with the lab, try to shadow that individual, because that is a more valuable lesson than just going and shadowing a general practitioner or something along those lines.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I was just gonna mention that I heard in there like a depth versus number type question. And I think for everything in your application, you always want to think about quality over quantity. That could be, you know, clinical experience, it's research, it's all of the extracurricular things you might want to do, but you want to make sure you're engaging in things that you care about, that you enjoy doing, that you're, you know, passionate about those things, and not think about this as like, I have to do these things because that's what they want to see, or I have to get to a certain number of hours. It should never feel that way, because we can tell, you know, when that's what your application looks like versus these are things I enjoy doing. This is what I enjoy spending my time doing. And I want to do these things to help prepare myself for this future path that I plan to take.
Awesome. So we're going to alternate between each microphone. And for our panelists, since we are going to end a little bit early, if we can just maybe get 2 responses per each question. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you so much for your time. My name's Kasha Chakraborty. I'm a postbac at NINDS. And I was wondering if you guys could maybe give your input on your view of the advantages of an MD PhD program as opposed to, let's say, just doing an MD alone, but trying to engage in research, either whether that's like built into the curriculum or outside, and kind of like how that can help if your goal is to become a physician scientist.
I mean, I think one of the advantages with the physician scientist, because it always is a good question that comes up, and you know, one of the things with the physician scientist, and in particularly even the MD PhD program, is that we create this sort of community actually for like-minded students. It's not necessarily training for MD only or PhD only. It's actually the integration. And I think that's having that sort of community, the program, the MD PhD program that you know exists at many different institutions. That's its advantage. And in doing so, you wind up getting getting the fundamentals to do both actually quite well, which are slightly different in the term, particularly in terms of thinking about doing just science with the PhD portion. There may be a little bit more rigor in terms of actually in a more systematic way of learning how to ask that really important question, which is an important aspect of receiving a PhD and then addressing it. That formal training actually, I think, is very important. And then you couple that with the integration of the MD, you know, I think as Jose has mentioned, then you're kind of now tying that to sort of clinical questions, which I think in many ways, that's what we're looking for in terms of training. So, you know, I think that's, to me, at least a major advantage of an MD PhD program.
Thank you.
All right, next question.
Let me just add one thing, and that is MDs, the chances of an MD to be doing 50% research in their 10 years later after finishing training is 1%. PhDs, 18%, MD PhDs, 43%, and actually 53 doing you know, more than 40% research. So it's the best path if you want to do research. And time to NIH R01s is exactly the same. In fact, this year is worse for MD onlys. So, you know, there's no shortcuts. You're going to have to do critical science.
Hello, my name is Imran Idris. I am a current rising senior at University of Maryland College Park. I'd like to first just start off by saying thank you all for taking the time to be here and talking to us. I've learned like a great deal already being here. And my question is based on, I understand that you can be committed for 8 years. Research doesn't really have a timetable, so sometimes it could be even longer than 8 years. How do you and your communities protect students, especially MD PhD students, from like burnout and make sure that their mental health and everything is okay?
I think the MD PhD programs, we all have very big support systems. They're tight communities. And we do a lot of mental wellness focused events throughout the year. We also do a lot of, there's MD PhD as a community or a smaller bunch. So you do a lot of things together. So we have seminars just for MD PhDs. We have social clubs that are just MD, PhD. And so you really form this tight-knit community. We also have families, like I forget what they're called, like Big Sib families, which are groups, I think we all do this, which are between, so like from an MS1 to an MS3 and then the grad school. So it's a couple from each year, so that there's a lot of peer-to-peer advising. And I think that sort of community helps. We also, from the administrative side, really try and meet with the students a lot. We have director breakfasts and lunches. We have an MSTP career advisor that everyone's assigned to one, and they do twice a year dinners. So there's all sorts of different ways that we can keep track of you and also keep track of your progress through the program, but also of like how you're doing mentally.
Thank you, guys.
Hello, my name is Taylor Reneker, and I'm a rising junior at the University of Southern California. And currently I am working as a summer intern in the National Institute of Mental Health. I have a few questions for you just about, I know it is important for you guys to know us as applicants, but I also hope to know you guys as programs. And my question is how to avoid the kind of cookie cutter, like copy paste, like self plagiarism like machine you get into sometimes with these application processes, and how to feel like we really know you guys as programs.
I mean, I think, you know, websites can only say so much. So sometimes getting to talk to people, Larry, like you're doing here today, you're maybe learning a little bit more about the vibe behind a program, what it's like. Some programs might, you know, use social media to share what they're doing, you know, things like that, where you might find a bit more student life-centered things, more real-time aspects about the program. And I think if you get an opportunity to connect with students, sometimes that's of course a great way to hear more about what it's really like there. And is that something that you might want to do? And then when you're answering maybe those secondary essays, which I think is what you're getting into, you know, why is that program interesting to you? What about that program, besides what you just read on the website, but maybe what you found from some of these other types of explorations, is really feeling like a thing that you might enjoy or would work well for you for your training?
I think it's possibly easier to contact people who are at MD PhD programs than you think. At our table, I was telling students that on our admissions page, we have a little red button that if you click on it, it opens a Qualtrics survey and is called Ask an MD PhD Student a Question. And we really have students who will reach out and answer queries from applicants. And I think that many programs, if you have a really specific question, can I talk to somebody on your student council about community? Can I talk to somebody in your program about opportunities for, you know, this kind of research or mental, you know, health services or engagement with the community? If you can target it and send it to the admissions coordinator, they may be able to hook you up with somebody who can have a really good conversation about your concerns.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just add that the AMC does a virtual fair every April. And that's another, you know, good place to just get started at, you know, learning programs, learning schools, and learning who to talk to as well.
Sorry, just in addition to that, how do you find then to maximize the kind of like a booth situation where you're maximizing what you're getting from the people you're talking to and what they're getting from you? I feel like I'm struggling with that even just in this context.
I think that you should be the one taking advantage of the booth. We're going to talk to a lot of people really quickly. And so it is probably not likely that we're going to remember a ton about you just from this conversation. So I would approach it as what do you as a potential applicant really need to know about these programs? And I would second Barbara's question that if you're interested in specific things, those are a lot more helpful to ask about than general, you know, just wanting to know more, because it's a lot easier for us to really answer those things you're interested in than just try to give you a broad overview in a very short amount of time, right? So trying to find, you know, what are your interests? What do you actually care about when you're looking at these programs? And really asking specific questions. And it's for you to learn a lot more here than it is for us to learn. That's what we'll do when we get your application.
Okay, thank you for your time. Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm a postbac at the National Cancer Institute, and Dr. Cavazos mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I was wondering, like Dr. Chi and Dr. Cavazos, you guys said that you still see patients, so I was wondering how you split up your time between the lab and seeing patients in clinic, and how you've kind of bridged the two disciplines of the MD and the PhD in your career.
So in my career, I've been 20% clinical, actually even less now. 10% clinical, all the way to 90% clinical, in bridging between grants. So you are not going to be a static person along this entire career. If you look at our outcome study for MD, PhD trainees who are in academic medicine primarily, there is actually a continuum between individuals who are doing 100% research to individuals who are doing almost no research, okay? And it just happened that the point of equilibrium, the middle 50%, it was happened at 53%. And when you ask the question, how many of those were funded, it was the 43%, which is what I told you about. So it may differ depending upon the year, depending upon what your funding is. Right now, I have my salary is 70% NIH supported, but or supported in 3 grants, but might be different next year, etc. So this is one of the reasons why we don't burn out as much as the regular clinician who is having to push RVUs. RVUs are the relative value units. And believe me, every single one of the people, MDs that graduate and start practicing, they start the day with $1,000 in debt because they have to pay the overhead of the clinic and et cetera, et cetera. This is incredible that people pay me to be talking to you and doing, balancing ideas about, how to make the care of people with seizures or Alzheimer's better. It's really incredible. As long as you live within your means, this is an incredible career. Believe me, I mean, you can have it all, okay? You can have family, you can have, time for yourself, time for travel, time for, do productive research and time to see patients. It's very fulfilling.
Yeah, I would fully agree with Jose. I mean, the best part about this career pathway is the flexibility and the things that you can do with it. I think the only drawback is the co-director, Paul Insel, says at UCSD is that you have to make a choice, actually, and that could be the hardest part. But you can do all sorts of things, and you can see, as Jose mentioned, the wide spectrum of effort that physician scientists do clinically in research in terms of how they divide their time and yet still participate, make impact, particularly translational impact. I myself, again, 10, 20%. It also depends that where I spend my time clinical. It also depends on your specialty. I don't do clinic at all. I just purely do CCU time. I'm an inpatient. It's a choice that I made. I could have done clinic, and it depends on your profession. The one thing that I think trainees should think about is that whatever you wind up deciding to do clinically, you still have to be able to have enough time to practice to do it well. And so sometimes things where you actually have to manipulate, like you actually have to do a procedure, that can be sometimes a little bit more challenging. Sometimes you have to take that into account in terms of how much effort that you have to put in to be able to still be competent at that particular skill set. Things where you can be a little bit more cerebral because we're always thinking, and it's not just clinically, but we're thinking about research. We're even thinking about clinically in our research. You're constantly thinking. So it's actually easy to make that transition when it's something that's less, at least for myself and some of my other colleagues, because I'm in a a subspecialty where there is a lot of procedures where you have to start, it's easier when you don't have to actually think about making sure that you still can do that procedure. So just something for I think trainees to think about as they go into the physician scientist career path.
Thank you. All right, we have about 10 minutes left. Next question.
Sure. Hi, my name is Rajiv. I'm a new postbac at the Institute on Aging. Thank you very much. I had a similar question about the breakdown, but I had a question, I guess, about residency. And I know with MD, PhD students, some of them just sort of opt out of residency, I think entirely. And I want to know sort of what goes into that choice and sort of how many students do that and how that happens.
Actually, 95% of MD, PhD graduates do residency.
Mhm.
Now, what kind of residency? It's a different question. And so there is PSTPs, so similar to MSTPs, where they do, like 2 years of internal medicine, 2 years of cardiology, 2 years of research. Or you do the traditional, clinical piece, and then you do postdoc. Unfortunately, you have to go back and get those skills, re-entry into the lab, re-entering through the thinking so that you can start getting the grants that allow you to do the transition. And so NIH has some really beautiful grants for people to transition from residency directly into faculty with money so that they can use it as levers as they are, trying to go to other places. And so you become wanted.
And to speak maybe to the people who decide not to do residency training, even though they're in a minority, for some of them, I think they're so passionate about research that they realize that they don't want to be distracted by even the small amount of clinical work that we do. They want to live their life fully in the space of research. And some are very successful with an MD, PhD and parlay that into a lab startup pretty much right after graduation. So I've seen a number of those people. I think the other place where I've seen people not do residencies is that honestly, they realize that what interests them is a sort of medicine question, entrepreneurship, application that, a residency program just isn't in line with. And so I've seen people go off and, become very entrepreneurial, start their own companies, work sort of towards a purpose where they're applying their research and clinical training, but not to see patients.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for your time. My name is Amelia Chowdhury. I'm a rising third year at Virginia Commonwealth University. And my question is more about the admissions process because MD PhD is a rigorous, time-consuming, and varies per school. So some have MMI style, some require for you to do an MD interview, then a PhD interview, then conversations. So how does a potential student navigate those tough waters and keep their head on straight during that time?
Yeah, I think the application year is a very busy year and you have to go into it knowing that and preparing for that and planning for that. And you are going to have to spend time preparing for every interview. What is the format of this interview? Who am I meeting with? What types of interviews are they going to be? Let's read about the faculty that you're meeting with. Let's know about their research a little bit. They're going to want you to ask questions if they're research faculty and that's why you're meeting them. If you're meeting with, MSTP team members or, ask about the program and ask questions that show that you've spent the time doing the research. So it is going to be busy. I think just like with our students though, you can be busy and prepare, but also find time for yourself, right? Take your mental health breaks that you're going to need and do the things that you enjoy doing. And that's what we would tell our students to do as they get busy in their training as well. I think definitely going into the application year, knowing that year, once you click submit, it's not over and it's going to take a lot of time, that entire year as you're writing secondaries, as you're preparing for your interviews, as you're attending your interviews, and then you're also trying to do your projects in your lab yet too. And some people are trying to even contribute to publications during that time and wrap up things, over that year. So you're going to be busy. So this is a great time to continue the skills that you've learned in terms of balancing and how that works for you. And then also, that'll be good preparation for going into these training programs that are also demanding too.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, panelists. Thank you so much for your time. I have a question more on I'm a rising sophomore at Temple University. So like, I'm now like trying to figure out like what my why is and like why I'd want to continue doing this, like why I'd want to go further into this in like the future. So if one of you could like go into specifics, so like, what was your why and when did you realize what your why was? Almost something like that.
I mean, I remember very clearly that my why was I really wanted to do research. Somebody had inspired me by sort of describing a PhD as discovering something that nobody had ever seen or known before. And that caught my imagination from when I was very young. And I always loved the life sciences. I didn't have a physician role model. So the why of an MD PhD program came pretty late for me when I was an undergraduate in a lab with 2 MD PhD students who sort of shared their excitement about basically doing research that was so connected to human health. And so I went into an MD PhD program as somebody who knew they wanted to do research that affected people, but I didn't find out that I enjoyed being a doctor and actually helping care for people until I was in the program.
I just want to say, I don't have an MD PhD, but for my PhD, I think I never had a role model PhD. I don't think I went to a very small liberal arts college. I think the advice that I give my students is to always do what you like and just keep following that path. And the people that are around you are probably also have similar interests, and you'll see like what doors open. So I made decisions based on looking back. It's easy for me to see like, oh, this is where if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have gotten a PhD. But going through it, really what I was doing was being honest with what I liked and just doing more of that. And it eventually got me into research, and then I went and got a PhD. But if you had asked me in college, would you get a PhD? I'd be like, what? No, right? I don't know what that is. It sounds super scary. But then I didn't really know what to do. So I got a master's and did research. And I was like, ooh, this is cool. I like working with this. And then I did more, right? So I think just keeping track of what you like and doing more of that will lead you on the right path.
Thank you.
All right, we have time for a few more questions. Go.
Okay, I was going to ask.
Mhm.
My name is Alex Leonard, and anyway, I am a senior at Brigham Young University in Utah. I guess the question I have is a little bit abstract, but I figured that you were the greatest panelist I could ask for it, which is in these positions of authority where you're constantly probably stressing about how do we make our programs better? How do we make it better treat the individual? How do we have better turnout? I was wondering, how do you think the MD PhD programs need to evolve, or that we as prospective students need to change so that we can better treat the individual, that we can have a better connection between science and medicine? Does that make sense? I guess I should ask.
One of the things that we've done at NYU is the NYU opt-in residency. And the idea is that the MD PhDs, and it's for MDs as well, but for MD PhDs, it helps so that they can apply to an NYU residency at the end of their PhD. And then they don't have to go through the match. And the idea is, one, we get to retain our talent, but the other idea is they're still with their family, they're still with their lab. And so that they can try and continue to do research during their residency, and the residency directors know them. One of the other things we're looking into is starting a PhD program for our residents, so that they're in residency and doing research. I think it is a struggle for all MD PhD programs to get through, once you go through residency and losing those that time in research, it's hard to get back in. I think that's one of the things we're trying to be creative about, the timing.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we're going to do one more question and then we will wrap up. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for taking the time to sit and talk with us and inspire us. My name is Kathleen Fremont. I'm a rising sophomore at Temple University. My question is building off of your why. Have you ever faced hesitancy or doubt during your journey after making your decision? And if so, how do you combat that, especially when it's just from burnout, but at the time you don't know that?
You make decisions with information that you had available at that moment in time. Okay? We all have self-doubts at all times. We have imposter syndrome thoughts, intrusions along the way. You didn't have enough papers, enough grants, enough this, etc. The question that you need to ask yourself, did I try to do my best with and did the decisions that were the most according to the information that I had available at that time? You can live with yourself.
I just wanted to say that, you know, as a physician scientist, I think it's a privilege that we do so many different things, that we wear so many hats, interact with so many different people. So when I heard your question, I was thinking that sometimes I have a really down moment because a grant didn't get funded. But then I'm on service and a patient will be so grateful, or I can make an impact in their care, or a student will come and share some amazing result with me, or we can work on something that is a struggle for them and solve it. So my life constantly is a balance of, you know, things that are disappointing, but also things that are incredibly sort of rewarding. And I think that helps us remember our why.
Yeah, and I think that to kind of get through that, you just kind of mentioned about the wellness program and the vertical integration that we have in our programs. I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest key points of the MD PhD programs is that community. I think all of us will experience at some point something that winds up happening that's not to our favor, and it's actually how you wind up handling that. And actually you find out it's your peers and you're not alone. Actually, you find out that we're all experiencing that same thing. And then I think that having those sort of numbers, and, you know, in terms of like everybody else's experience, you kind of like are able to commiserate, help each other get through that. I'll be the first to admit, I almost quit my MD PhD at one point, and it was actually people that were just ahead of me. It's sort of that peer-to-peer mentoring that was mentioned by Suzanne. I think that was critical for me to kind of get through that. And, you know, in some ways, I also got a very bad score this past week too, Barb. So I kind of hurting on that one. And, you know, you wind up lamenting it with colleagues and friends, and then you pick up and then you kind of keep going, knowing that you have your friends that are helping you, backing you up. And I think that's probably the nicest thing about the MD PhD programs, the community actually. And that not only goes with just the students and trainees, but it's actually all the programs. We help each other out in that sense. We're all in this together.
We wanted to reiterate one thing with like, you're not alone. And I think a lot of times when we have this imposter syndrome, we think, oh, I'm the only one that feels this way. But I bet everyone in this room is nervous about something or feels, you know, bad about something, or like they're not doing something good enough, including all of us on the panel, right? So I think you just talk to people and like let people know, and you're really not alone.
You keep asking yourself, I did not express myself well enough. I did not express myself well enough. And so you go at it again. So it's not to give up. It's not that you fall. It's what did you do after the fall? That is what defines you, is the getting up and fighting again. So I did not express myself well enough in my grant, in the paper, in my, you know, the idea. I mean, we're selling ideas. So that's what we do and keep telling ourselves. And clearly that's what we're trying to tell you. Now, there's a lot of MD PhD leaders in the room. If you can come to the front, we're going to have about 10, 15 minutes more of questions, but these are going to be individual with all of them and us. And so please, MD PhD leaders first, come to the front of the room. I see, I mean, the lights are really bright, but I know that I mean, you guys are there.
Dr. Hardy, is there time for another question, or you want the leaders
I
there?
think we're going to go ahead and end
Okay.
here. So
great.
if we can thank our panelists for coming in today. Please don't leave. They've all agreed to stick around for a little bit. So please come up to the front and ask our panelists. There's other MSTP program directors here as well. Please come up and ask them your questions for the next maybe 10 minutes or so. Thank you, everyone.